It's time for a little update on my little art project here. This is the second episode of 12 on my little, what turned out to be a small podcast on ultra learning. Can you learn a new skill in just 1 minute per day? So I chose, as you probably know by now, painting. And another month has passed, so now I've done 2 of these milestone paintings. And during this month when I'm painting, I have this document on my phone where I write down what I learn on this journey, different things. And the purpose of these little podcasts is just to tell you about them, so I can show you what I've learned, and it's also a good thing for me to get it out, so I really document my progress. So, well, let's start. One thing that I've learned is that I believe that the upper time limit is perhaps even more effective than to have a lower time limit. It changes everything, because when I've been playing musical instruments, I've been doing it like this, that I practice 15 minutes every day. Nevertheless, it can go more than 15, that's no problem, but you should never go below 15. The difference here is that I can only do 60 seconds, no more, no less. But what I realized that when you have this upper time limit, you're battling against yourself, against the clock. It's like you're transformed into another state of mind. It's like going into trance or hypnosis or hyper-focused deep work mode. So I'm starting to suspect that these 60 seconds, because of the upper time limit, it's even more effective. So maybe the trick is to use an upper time limit as well. It could be worth trying in some of my other projects, because when I play the drums, for instance, I sometimes go over time. It's a bit more than 15 minutes. Often it's 15, because I have a life on the side, even though I'm probably part of the antisocial practice club, but I do have a life, and that's why mostly I can only play 15 minutes, because that's what I have. But sometimes you have a little bit more, and then I play a little bit more if I'm having fun. So it's quite, if you're in the zone, that you should voluntarily, oh, time's up, I quit, and I go, and I leave it. But what happens if you do that? It's like you feel the urge, you feel the desire to come back again. And this might be a little gem that we need to think about. Okay, there are many points. I'm not going to go through them all. I've evaluated some more styles the last month. I tried to flip the colors into black and white, because I think the whole first month it was just white background and a black pen or some slight differences. So I just flipped it around with a black background and painted with a white pen instead. And it's quite amazing how different it feels, just this little subtle change. The feeling from the picture is completely different. And when I was doing the black and white paintings, I also experimented a bit with how to document these photos and upload them. Usually it's supposed to be fast. Really fast this. So when I use this iPad and I paint on this one with the Apple Pencil, and when I'm done, I put it on the table and I take a photograph of the screen and I upload it, and I photograph the thing I've just painted. I don't do the screenshot, even though that would be probably even faster. It would be better quality perhaps, but I doubt it would be faster actually. Just take the camera, you take 2 shots in a row, Instagram, bam bam, poof, it's online. Because I try to reduce the required time as much as humanly possible. But what happens when you photograph the screen compared to taking a screenshot is that you get a different vibe, a different feeling of the resulting image of what you just painted. And when you do the black and white, when you have a black background and a white pen, I noticed that they are a bit more difficult to photograph like this, because you get all the reflections. I can see myself quite clearly here in the black screen. So I had to go into my closet, turn off all the lights, close the doors, and make the room pitch black, and then I could take a photograph. So it's quite quite a lot of work to do those black and white inverted images. Unless, of course, I just do the screenshot thing and I crop them to square ratio and post them. But the thing is, I think they look a bit more awesome when I photograph them compared to taking a screenshot. It's true. I think I did some kind of knife early this month, which got quite a lot of engagement. And I promise you, that one looked much nicer when I took the photograph compared to taking a screenshot. So even that makes a difference. Here's the next lesson. I need to prepare more and simplify more. And what that means is to make sure you have pencils and papers everywhere. Put a pencil and a paper in your car in the glove compartment, just in case you're traveling and you're standing on the gas station or something. Oh, you gotta do your 1-minute painting. You just grab it and do something. Paint something that you see out through the car window, and you can keep papers and pencils just about anywhere. But just make sure that you remove all kinds of friction to get started, so that you can just grab it and go wherever you are. And that's why I think the iPad has been the perfect tool for this project, because you're instantly and you're going. And I mean, when you're dealing with creativity, it's the number of seconds you can reduce before you can get started. They make all the difference. So don't underestimate the power of getting started quickly. Even though if it's not the perfect tool for the job, but if you get started 10 seconds faster, I would guess that the end result will benefit. Next thing, line thickness. I think it was about 40 days from the beginning. I started to experiment with, if I push a pencil different pressure and I angle it a little bit to different directions, I can get different line thickness. And this can be used to produce great effect and depth in the picture. So that was not something I was aware of before. So that was a good lesson. I've started to experiment a little bit more with lighting and shadows, and trying to think about more where's the light coming from, where's the light source in this image, how are the shadows coming down, and sometimes you have several light sources, so you can see 1 or 2 or perhaps even 3 shadows on the table when you're drawing an object. And one of these light sources might be stronger than the other ones, and then maybe it produces a more distinct shadow and stuff like that. So that's something I've become more aware of. And what I've also done is I started to experiment a little bit with highlights as well. Like when you have a shiny object and you can get some reflection from the sun or a light source or a window or something. So I tried to capture those as well. I realized that if by using just 2 colors instead of just 1, you can add a lot more depth to the image. Let's say if I'm gonna paint something that has a color, this thing for instance, it's green. So let's say if I grab a green pen and I draw this, and then I quickly shift to a black pen and I add some shading on it before the timer runs out. It should be possible. And that's going to add a lot more information, and it's going to be a much more interesting picture to look at when I'm done. And also when I shift to the black pen, I can add the shadows. So you have to have like a little battle plan in your mind in the order you're going to do it, because in 1 minute you can only change color like once and maybe 2 times if you're pushing it. Because some of the pictures I have been experimenting to trying to add many colors, but then the detail deteriorates because I only have 60 seconds time budget to do each sketch. And for every new color I change, I lose out on the detail. So maybe 2 colors is perhaps the best bang for the buck. But also it depends a lot on what kind of artifact are you painting? What's the object? If there is an object that has a lot of colors in it, maybe it's better to go for black and white and try to translate it. But if there is like some of my son's toys, they often have some vibrant colors, and then I can just use 1 or 2 colors on them and get it. You capture it in a good way. But you can get very far just by adding two colors, one with the shade and one with the dominant color. Yeah, I also been experimenting, like I said before, with black and white background. But I also tried in the middle of this month something to add other colors on the background, like a green background, because I often have, you've seen it when I photograph the things that I'm painting. They're standing on this IKEA thing that you put on the table when you eat so you don't get the food stains on the table, and it's green. So I tried to use that kind of green color as a background when I was painting. But I also tried to take a light gray instead of a white paper, so you're somewhere in the middle, because that's kind of cool. But because if you have a light gray background, you can work with both highlights and shades. So you draw your motif, and then you add a black pen instead. Yeah, I did like this beetle, a huge beetle, a couple of days ago, a week ago, something, which was like purple. So I had a dark purple pen. I drew the main parts of the beetle, shifted to black, added the shadings, and then quickly, the last seconds of the minute, I just changed to white, and I added some reflections, highlights. And that really made that was definitely the best one so far, and it got a lot of engagement too. So it's not just me; the audience seemed to like it as well. So the background color can be quite useful thing to work with. Color on the paper. So yeah, and this brings me to the next point on my list also with the beetle. That if you have an interesting motif, an interesting object that you're painting, that's really important. I mean, it works just as well with the 60-second images as they do with my milestone pictures that I draw for like 1 hour, 2 hours. If you have an interest, something interesting to look at, that's what generates the engagement. And the beetle was definitely interesting, and it was very interesting to me, and I guess that translated out into the pictures. You got a feeling of to be interested in it too when you looked at it. You get a lot more engagement when there's something that is deviant from the norm. And also I think that beetle is about, I was a bit surprised how good it turned out, because when I look at the pictures side by side and compare them, the perspective is good, the details are nice. I mean, it turned out really nice, and I haven't, my hypothesis is that because this experience, when we saw this beetle, my wife and I, and it was walking on her arm like this, this was a very interesting experience for me. So all my senses just fired up on maximum, and my mind was completely aligned on this beetle. So my mind was aligned, my brain was just beetle mode. And then when I go and I paint it that's why it turned out so good, because my mind was completely conditioned to draw this beetle. And I've never hardly drawn animals before. Yeah, I did some attempt to draw my dog in the beginning, but it's quite difficult. It's easier, I think, to draw some like a square thing or stuff. Not to say that perspective is trivial, because it's definitely not. It's one of the things that I've been fighting the most with. But at least it's easier to get the big parts of a cube compared to the important parts of a beetle. Okay, what else do we have here? Yeah, regarding the milestone that I drew yesterday, I did something rather annoying, because okay, here's the picture of the digger, and when I was making this one, I kind of do with a pinch zoom, and I go in and I go out to work on certain parts of this image. And when I did this pinch zoom, I accidentally had the black thin pencil selected. And when I did this, I did a black line all the way through, from the road, through the digger and up here into the forest. And I didn't notice it because I was so in the flow mode, so I couldn't see that I did this. And then I painted and painted and painted for quite a long time. And then when I zoom out and I look at it, what? Did the screen on the iPad just crack? No, it's a line that I made myself. Damn. So I started to hammer on the undo button. I think if I just reverse enough, maybe this line will go away. But it was so, I don't know if it saves like 100 or 200 operations or something, but I until I couldn't go back anymore and the line was still there. So then I just redo and I go forward into the undo history again to back where I left off. Because I had added a lot of branches and details, so I didn't want to redo all that. So what happened, I had to go in and correct and get rid of this line. And this is not trivial, and it took quite a lot of time. Maybe I probably added at least half an hour of just repairing the damage I had done because I was a bit careless with the pinch zoom. So that's really something I have to think about in the future. One could also add and work with layers in this picture. But that's like advanced level in these programs, when you have one layer for the background, maybe one layer for the forest, and one layer for the digger, and so on and so forth. But it's a little bit like cheating. So I only have one layer. I'm painting on the background layer, and that's it. So there are 0 layers except the background here. Which also is an interesting thing regarding this, because if you want to have some depth in an image like this, maybe you draw the sky first, and then you put the earth, and then you add the forest, and then you add the digger, and finally you add the foreground with the little leaves and stuff that's coming out here. So it's like 3 dimensions. And I don't really know how to do this and which order to do it, so I'm just going at everything at once and to see what happens. Works quite nicely, but if I would learn to do the layers thing, I think I could add a lot of more 3D depth into the picture. But maybe that's something for next month or further into the future. It's a bit too complicated right now. But it's definitely something that you have to think about as an artist. In which order are you going to do this? If you're going to paint a tree, you're probably better off if you paint the trunk first and the branches, and then you add the leaves, because they are in front of you of those things. It's much harder to draw the tree, the wood, after you've drawn the leaves. You know what I'm saying? And you can think about this on the whole image. Another thing that was interesting here is that I put quite a lot of detail on the digger, and not a lot of detail at all on the background. It's kind of blurry, which makes the viewer will focus on this digger. That's what you're going to see. And that's how our vision system works, basically. We have this small little thing in the middle of our center of our vision, and the rest is peripheral. So this is how we see things, actually, with our eyes. We can only focus on a little thing. And also when I add these like small splashes of red color, it also captures our attention. So you can... They make it interesting, because they are different compared to all the other things. You also have contrast with yellow and red. It's the only places where you can see this. These are not nature colors. They really pop out from the picture. This is also similar to when I dress up with my suits and my lapel flowers and ties and all that stuff. Now I'm just wearing my dog clothes and I'm not groomed at all. So but when I do put some energy into how I dress, I also work with a lot of contrast. So it's a bit the same thing. I could put good use of my experience from men's fashion when I'm painting. And another thing is that a painting, it's like a filter. I was thinking, I mean, if you have a photograph, let's see if I can find it. Yeah, here's the original picture of the digger. You can see them in my news feed on Facebook or Instagram if you want to. The big ones. I mean, here's a lot of detail in this picture, and then when you look at the one I painted, it's a lot less detail. So why is this picture more interesting than the photograph? This is not that interesting, but this one is, even though there's a lot of less detail here. And I spoke to this with my wife, and she said that, yeah, it's because this drawing of yours has passed through a filter. I am that filter. I see this digger and I see the surroundings, and it goes through my mind and it comes out through the pen. And that's kind of cool. I mostly just take away a lot of information and I put back in the drawing just a little bit of it. But I guess that as an artist also, sometimes you add stuff that isn't there. In my case, I didn't add anything on this picture knowingly. I probably have done some things here that is different from the original. Maybe these cables that are going on the mechanics on the arm, and maybe all the trees aren't where they should be. So that means that I've added stuff, but I haven't done it on purpose. But I guess that a skilled artist could probably add a little reflection here and there and just modify the original to make it even more interesting. But in my case, I'm just trying to replicate the picture as to the best of my abilities and see what comes out. And finally, when I was painting this one, I lost track of time. My son went to sleep, and then I just started painting when he was sleeping, and I managed to finish this one before he woke up. And by looking at the timestamps and trying to do some detective work, I've determined that I must have put about 1 hour and 45 minutes on this picture. But you could probably subtract 30 of those because of this mistake I did with the pinch zoom. So that's a note to self for the future. Not to say, but I mean, it's probably a good lesson to learn how to fix errors as well. But anyhow, it's 1 hour 45 minutes to do this one. 61. Yeah, this was number 62. Whereas 2 of those are milestones. So there are 60 1-minute sketches. And the previous milestone, I put 1 hour of painting. So if I am correct in my calculations, the total time that I have spent learning how to paint from scratch, from zero, I hadn't done anything since I was back in high school, like when I was 14 or 15 years old. That's the last time that I did real art and real painting. So I say I start from zero. It's nothing. 3 hours and 45 minutes of practice, and then I could pull off something like this. And that's quite interesting. That's very interesting, because I think it's quite a clear indication that my hypothesis is correct. I believe that you can acquire a new skill in just 1 minute per day. It's the consistency that matters. It's not the clock hours you put in. It's the consistency and the discipline to just keep showing up every single day, no matter what happens. There are no excuses not to do a 1 minute painting. And if you do this, you will constantly keep your mind spinning around the topic of drawing. And I'm just, when I'm talking to people and when I look at things, oh, there's a reflection, and that's how the shade is coming in from the window. It's all the time in my head. My subconscious is working, I think, with this. And that's why I really need to do it every day and use this 1 minute a day approach. And that's the final thing I had for today in my little takeaway here. So that was milestone 2 out of 12. And it's quite a nice feeling to just sit here and just lay it out and see what we can learn from this little experience. And if you're inspired and start some kind of similar project with painting or whatever skill, and try this 1 minute approach, please let me know. It would be super awesome to hear about your findings, if you experience something similar to me. And with that, see you next time in a month. Cheers.